Sandra Bullock stands beside Keanu Reeves as he faces the most public legal battle of his career, only to be shaken when Alexandra enters the courtroom as opposing counsel. Old friendships, new love, and long-buried secrets collide under oath, forcing all three to decide how much of the truth they are willing to risk, both in court and in their own hearts. Let me tell you about the day a courtroom turned into the hardest movie scene these three people had ever faced. It's a fictional story, but the feelings inside it, loyalty, fear, love, and the price of doing the right thing, are as real as it gets. The morning started with cameras, not for a film, but for the news. Outside the downtown Los Angeles courthouse, a crowd pressed up against metal barriers, holding phones in the air like a forest of tiny glass mirrors. Reporters shouted questions, security guards tried to keep a clear path, and somewhere in the middle of that chaos, Keanu Reeves stepped out of a black sedan, his shoulders slightly hunched, as if the weight of the whole city's judgment had settled there overnight. He wasn't walking a red carpet today. He was walking into a legal battle that could destroy everything he had spent a lifetime quietly building. Sandra Bullock came out of the car right behind him, one hand on the door, the other already reaching for his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. She wore a white blazer that almost glowed under the pale morning light, but it was the calm on her face that drew the cameras. She squeezed his elbow, leaned in, and spoke too softly for the microphones to catch, and in that moment she didn't look like a movie star or even like a witness. She looked like what she really was to him, an old friend who refused to stand anywhere but at his side. "Your tie is crooked," she murmured, adjusting it with quick fingers, pretending that was the only problem they had to deal with today. Her smile was small but stubborn. "If we're going to war, at least go in looking like you've already won." He tried to smile back, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I thought you said this wasn't a war," he replied, voice low, almost swallowed by the noise around them. "It's not," Sandra said. "It's a truth test, and you, my friend, happen to be very good with the truth." He held onto those words as security led them inside, away from the shouts and flashing lights. The marble floor of the courthouse was cold and polished, the air smelling faintly of paper, coffee, and old wood. Every step echoed in the hallway like a reminder. This is real, this is happening, you can't cut to another take. Keanu glanced up at the high ceilings, the flags, the rows of wooden benches swarming with strangers who already thought they knew his story. He had fought villains on screen, jumped off buildings, saved entire cities in fiction. But right now, the real enemy felt invisible, a mixture of fear, public opinion, and a powerful studio that had decided he was the easiest one to blame. A young man in a security uniform hesitated as they passed, then blurted out, "Mr. Reeves, I just wanted to say your movies helped me get through some rough years." His cheeks flushed as he realized he might be crossing a line. "Sorry, sir, you probably hear that all the time." Keanu stopped, even though every second mattered. He looked the guard in the eyes, not over his shoulder, not past him. "Thank you," he said, simple and sincere. "I'm glad they helped. Take care of yourself, okay?" He gave the young man a small nod before moving on. Sandra watched that tiny exchange and felt a familiar ache in her chest. This was the real reason she was here. Not because of the headlines, not because of the stakes, but because the world was now judging a man who still paused to be kind when his own life was falling apart. It made her protective in a way she couldn't explain, even after all the years of working with him, laughing with him, surviving Hollywood with him. They stepped into the anteroom outside Courtroom 7B, and for a moment the world grew quieter. The heavy wooden doors were closed. Only a few people sat on the benches, whispering. A TV on the wall was replaying footage from outside, Keanu and Sandra arriving, slow-motion shots of them pushing through the crowd, bold text running across the bottom. "Action star faces court in stunt tragedy case." Keanu's jaw tightened at the words. They made it sound like he had walked in with blood on his hands. Sandra followed his gaze to the screen, then deliberately turned her back on it, placing herself between him and the TV. "Don't read the captions," she said. "You know how this goes. The story they're selling is not the story we're living." He stared at her for a long second, then nodded. "I just keep thinking about Marco," he said quietly. "He trusted me. He trusted all of us." The name hung between them like a ghost. Marco Rivera, the stunt coordinator whose tragic fall on set had started all of this. One second he had been laughing, strapping on his safety gear for another complicated sequence. The next, the harness had failed, and a man who had survived 100 dangerous stunts was suddenly gone. The world demanded someone to blame. The studio had lawyers. The producers had contracts. The company that made the harness had money. And in the middle of all that, Keanu had what everyone wanted to exploit: a famous face and a humble heart. "You knew Marco," Sandra said softly. "You know what he'd say if he were here." Keanu let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "Stop making that guilty face, man. It makes the rest of us look bad," he answered, imitating Marco's gravelly voice. His eyes glistened, but he blinked the moisture away. "He'd tell me to fight." "And not alone," Sandra reminded him. "You're not walking into that room by yourself. I'm here, your lawyers are here, and—" She hesitated, some instinct making her glance at the closed courtroom doors. "Well, we'll see who else shows up." He frowned at that, but before he could ask, the doors swung open and Keanu's legal team waved him forward. The lead attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Rivera, not related to Marco, a coincidence that still hurt, gave Sandra a tight nod of respect, then turned to her client. "We've reviewed everything again. We stick to the truth, we stick to the timeline, and we don't let them push you into anger. They want a headline, not a human being. Don't give it to them." Keanu inclined his head. "I'm not here to win headlines," he said. "I'm here to honor Marco and clear his name as much as mine." "That," Rivera replied, "is exactly why they're afraid of you." They entered the courtroom together. The space was bigger than it looked from the hallway, rows of wooden benches already filled with spectators, journalists, and a few people who just liked the drama of public trials. The judge's bench loomed at the front, flanked by flags. The air was thick with a strange mix of boredom and tension, like a movie set right before someone called action. Sandra sat down at the defense table beside Keanu, laying a folder of notes in front of her even though she knew half of what she brought was just to keep her hands busy. She could feel the eyes on the back of her neck, people whispering about seeing two beloved stars in such a serious place. A part of her wanted to turn and say, "We're people, not a show." But another part of her knew that, for some of them, this was the closest they would ever get to understanding how fame did not protect a person from pain. It only made that pain louder. "Where is she?" Keanu asked suddenly, voice low. Sandra's fingers tightened around her pen. "You don't know yet?" she asked carefully. "Know what?" He turned to her fully now, searching her face. "Sandra, did something change? You said you talked to her." Before she could answer, the bailiff called out, "All rise," and the room lurched into motion. Everyone stood as the judge entered and took her seat, her expression stern but not unkind. Papers rustled, chairs creaked. The world narrowed into this one wooden box where careers, reputations, and quiet promises would be tested. And then the side door opened. A woman stepped in, moving with a calm, steady grace that cut through the buzz of the room. Silver hair framed her face, falling neatly to her shoulders. She wore a charcoal gray suit and held a leather folder against her side like a shield. There was no red carpet confidence here, no need to be seen, just purpose, quiet and unshakable. Sandra felt Keanu go still beside her before she even turned to look. She didn't have to see his face to know his heartbeat had just changed rhythm. Alexandra Grant walked toward the plaintiff's table, every step loud in the silence that followed. Her eyes swept briefly across the room, landing for a fraction of a second on Keanu S., and in that tiny moment something passed between them, history, affection, a question, a warning. Then she looked away, her jaw setting, the professional mask sliding into place. "Your appearance for the record?" the judge asked. Alexandra lifted her chin, voice clear and controlled. "Alexandra Grant for the plaintiff, Your Honor." Sandra felt Keanu's hand curl into a fist on the table, his knuckles turning white. He didn't say a word, but the storm in his eyes said enough. The woman he trusted with his heart was now the one standing against him in court. And as Alexandra took her seat at the opposing table, eyes fixed straight ahead, Sandra realized that this trial wasn't going to be just about a tragic accident or a contract dispute. It was going to test what love really meant when truth and loyalty pulled in opposite directions. And no one in that room, not even Alexandra herself, knew yet which side her heart would choose. The first time Alexandra saw Keanu on a witness stand, it wasn't in a courtroom at all. It was years ago on a late-night talk show where he sat under bright studio lights and answered silly questions with shy honesty. Now, as she watched him rise to take the oath, the lights were harsher, the questions sharper, and nothing about this felt like entertainment. He lifted his right hand, eyes steady on the judge. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" "I do," he said, the words catching just a little in his throat. Alexandra forced herself to look down at her notes. She had practiced this moment in her mind 100 times. How to stay calm, how to stay professional, how not to let personal history soften her resolve. The file in front of her held timelines, safety reports, emails with red stamps across the top. It did not hold the nights she and Keanu had spent talking about art and ethics, or the way his hand felt when he traced circles on her palm while they waited in some quiet corner of the world for another flight. None of that belonged here. At least, that's what she told herself. The plaintiff's opening statement had painted a clear, painful picture. A stunt gone wrong, a man dead, a family shattered, and a powerful production machine already moving on to its next blockbuster. They had not called Keanu a monster. They had called him something in a way more dangerous, careless. A good man who had let a bad system carry him until someone else paid the price. When it was time for cross-examination, Alexandra stood up so quickly her chair rolled back a few inches. She smoothed her jacket with a steadying hand, then walked toward the witness stand, each footstep measured. She could feel Sandra's eyes on her, protective, suspicious, almost mother-wolf sharp. She kept her gaze straight ahead. "Mr. Reeves," she began, her voice clear but softer than she expected. "You've worked with Marco Rivera for how many years?" "Almost 15, Keanu replied. He was more than a colleague, he was a friend." The word friend trembled between them. Alexandra nodded. "In those 15 years, would you say he trusted your judgment?" "I'd say we trusted each other," Keanu answered. "We both cared about doing the work right and safely." She walked a slow half-circle, not to intimidate but to think. "On the day of the accident," she said, "you were performing a sequence that involved a 20-meter fall, correct?" "Yes." "And the original plan was to use a partial CGI blend for the most dangerous section of that fall, correct?" He hesitated. "There were discussions, yes." She glanced at the screen the court technician was already prepping. "Mr. Reeves, did you insist on performing that fall for real?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "I pushed for practical stunts wherever possible, yes, but never without." "Permission to play Plaintiff's Exhibit 12, Your Honor." Alexandra cut in, her own heart pounding now. She hated interrupting him. She hated this entire moment. But if she flinched, the truth would disappear into charm and sympathy, and Marco's family would walk out with nothing but condolences. The judge nodded. "Granted." The lights dimmed slightly as the screen flickered on. The footage was grainy, behind-the-scenes video from the set. Crew members moving around scaffolding, cables hanging, the skeleton of a city street half-built inside a soundstage. In the middle of it all stood Keanu and Marco, dressed in padded gear, helmets off while they reviewed the setup. From off-camera, a safety supervisor's voice said, "We can do the top half practical, but the full 20 meters is pushing it. CGI can handle the rest." On screen, Keanu shook his head, laughing lightly, that familiar, easy smile on his face. "Come on, we do it for real," he said. "That's what people love." The courtroom was silent except for the faint hiss of the speakers. The camera jerked as whoever filmed it adjusted their angle. Marco could be seen in profile, nodding slowly, thoughtful but not arguing. Off-camera, the same voice pushed back. "It's more risk, we're on a tight schedule, one mistake." "Then we don't make mistakes," Keanu's recorded voice replied. "We've got this, right, Marco?" Marco clapped him on the back. "Yeah, man, we've got this." The clip ended there abruptly. The lights brightened again, and every eye in the room swung back to the real Keanu on the stand, his face pale but steady. Alexandra let the silence hover for a moment. She could feel the jury's attention. She could feel the weight of every fan, every critic, every person who had ever said, "He's different. He's one of the good ones." That was exactly why this hurt. "In that footage," she said quietly, "we hear a safety concern raised. We hear you insisting. We do it for real." And we see Marco agreeing, relying on your confidence. Do you deny that putting pressure on him in that moment contributed to the risk he took? Keanu's fingers curled around the edge of the witness stand. He looked at the jury, then at Alexandra, then at the floor. When he finally answered, his voice was low. "I don't deny that people listen to me," he said. "I don't deny that my words carry weight, but that clip is not the whole conversation." "Did you or did you not push for the full 20-meter fall, Mr. Reeves?" she pressed. "I did," he said, meeting her eyes at last. Regret deepened the lines on his face. "And if that's what you're asking, then yes, I live with that every day." His honesty cut through her like glass. It was the answer that helped her case, and the one that made it hardest to breathe. "No further questions at this time," she managed. As she walked back to her table, the courtroom buzzed with a low murmur. The jury exchanged glances. The reporters started scribbling, already turning his words into headlines. Sandra leaned toward Keanu, whispering something that made him close his eyes just for a second. Alexandra sat down and pretended her hands weren't shaking. Because she knew, better than anyone in that room, what the video didn't show. The part of the conversation where Keanu had asked for extra padding, extra checks, extra time. The part that had somehow gone missing before the footage reached her desk. And as she stared at the frozen image of him on the screen, smiling, confident, full of trust in a system that did not deserve it, she had to face a question she had tried to avoid since taking the case. Was she really fighting for the truth, or had she just become another weapon in somebody else's cover-up? The moment the judge called for a recess, the courtroom exploded into motion. Reporters rushed for the doors, eager to be the first to upload that clip. Jurors filed out under strict instructions not to discuss the case, though a few of them exchanged heavy, troubled looks on their way. Spectators leaned over the wooden rails, buzzing with that uncomfortable energy that always rises when real people's pain starts to feel like a show. Keanu stepped down from the stand like a man coming off a battlefield. His posture was still straight, but his eyes were distant, replaying every second of that video. Sandra met him halfway, her hand landing firmly on his shoulder as if she were physically holding him up. "They cut it," he murmured, mostly to himself. "They cut the end." "I know," she said. "I was there." He turned to her, voice rough. "I remember telling them we'd only do the full fall if safety signed off. I remember saying we'd push the date if we had to. Where is that part?" Sandra's jaw tightened. "Ask the people who profit from leaving it out." Across the room, Alexandra gathered her notes with mechanical precision. She could feel their eyes flickering toward her. Keanu's pain, Sandra's anger, the defense attorney's calculation, the studio representatives' nervous satisfaction. She kept her face calm and unreadable, but inside a storm was building. She had requested every second of behind-the-scenes footage through formal channels. She had trusted that what she received was complete. Now, doubt gnawed at that trust like rust on metal. Her co-counsel, a younger lawyer named Matteo, leaned in. "That played really strong," he whispered. "The jury ate it up. We keep stacking moments like that. We're in excellent shape." Alexandra closed the file with a soft snap. "This isn't a game of moments," she said quietly. "It's a man's life, 2 men, actually." Matteo blinked, thrown off. "Of course, I just mean strategically." "Go take a break," she cut him off, but not unkindly. "Drink some water, clear your head." When he left, she finally allowed herself to look across the aisle. Keanu was sitting at the defense table now, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, staring at the floor like he was trying to see straight through it. Sandra was talking softly to him, one hand moving as if she were drawing a picture in the air, trying to put structure around chaos. Alexandra hesitated only a second before walking toward the side hallway, the one that led to the council rooms. As she passed the defense table, she felt Sandra's gaze snap up. "Alex," Sandra said, her voice sharp enough to cut paper. "Enjoying the show." Alexandra stopped. The hallway lay just ahead, but turning her back now felt like the one cowardice she couldn't afford. She faced them, her expression composed but her eyes tired. "This isn't a show to me," she replied. "Not Marco, not him, not any of this." Sandra stood, angling herself slightly between Alexandra and Keanu, pure instinct. "Could have fooled me with that video." "I didn't edit that clip," Alexandra said. "I requested full footage, that's what I received." "From who?" Sandra challenged. "From the studio's legal department," Alexandra answered. For a moment they all went silent. That was the problem, laid bare in one sentence. Everyone in this room was standing on ground someone else had prepared. Keanu finally looked up. His eyes met Alexandra's, and for a heartbeat the courtroom noise faded away. She saw hurt there and confusion and something that made her chest tighten, a pleading she had never seen from him before. "Did you know it was cut?" he asked quietly. "No," she said, and the word came out more raw than she intended. "If I had, I wouldn't have used it like that." Sandra watched her carefully, searching for even the smallest crack of dishonesty. She didn't find one, but that didn't soften the steel in her voice. "Intent doesn't change what just landed," she said. "They're painting him as reckless, and you handed them the brush." Alexandra's throat ached with words she couldn't say here. "I'm trying to protect Marco's family. I'm trying not to let power walk away clean. I'm trying not to betray you and them at the same time." Instead, she simply nodded once. "Then fix it," Sandra said quietly, "if you still can." Alexandra didn't answer. She turned and walked down the hallway, each step echoing against the tile, until she slipped into the small council room assigned to the plaintiff's team. The door clicked shut behind her, and the noise of the courthouse dropped to a faint hum. She leaned both hands on the table and closed her eyes. She thought of the first time Marco's sister, Elena, had sat in her office, clutching a worn photograph of her brother, her voice shaking with anger and grief. "They sent us a fruit basket," Elena had said. "A basket, after he died, like that could replace his kid's father." The studio had offered a quiet settlement with a long list of conditions. Non-disclosure, no public statements, no blame admitted. Elena had wanted one thing, the truth spoken out loud. That was why Alexandra had taken the case. Not for publicity, not for money, for the stubborn belief that systems only change when someone forces them into the light. Now that same belief made her feel trapped. A knock sounded at the door. She straightened. "Come in." It was not Mateo. It was Elena herself, still in the conservative dress she had worn to court, her eyes red but clear. "I saw the video," she said without preamble. I didn't know he pushed like that." Alexandra gestured to a chair. "It's only part of what happened," she said carefully. "We're still looking at all the evidence." Elena sat, wringing her hands together. "I don't want to hate him," she said. "My kids love his movies. Marco loved working with him. He always said Keanu respected the team more than anyone." "And I believe he did," Alexandra replied softly. "Good people can still make choices that have consequences. That's what courts are for, to sort through what happened and who should have done what differently." Elena swallowed hard. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing, going through with this?" Alexandra held her gaze. She thought about the missing footage, the studio's careful cooperation, the way powerful people always seem to slide just out of reach when blame started flying. She thought about Keanu sitting at that table, absorbing every accusation without once pointing a finger at anyone else. "I think," she said slowly, "that asking for answers is never wrong. What matters is who pays the price for those answers." Elena nodded, though it was clear nothing felt simpler. "I just don't want my brother to be forgotten," she whispered. "He won't be," Alexandra promised. "Not while I'm here." After Elena left, Alexandra stared down at the file again. She pulled out the disc with the stunt footage, turning it over in her fingers like it might reveal a secret if she held it long enough. Across the building, in a different consultation room, Sandra closed the door behind her and dropped into a chair opposite Keanu and their attorney, Rivera. "Okay," she said. "We need to stop playing defense and start telling the story ourselves." Rivera rubbed her temples. "That's what I've been trying to do," she replied. "But it's hard when the narrative is being edited before it ever reaches us." Sandra reached into her bag and pulled out a small digital recorder. its metal surface scratched from years of use on sets and press tour. She set it on the table like she was placing a bomb. "I wasn't going to use this," she said. "I wasn't sure if I even should, but we're past the point of safe choices." Keanu frowned. "What is it?" Sandra looked him straight in the eye. "A conversation with Martin Cole," she said. "Head of production. I visited him 2 weeks after Marco died. I told him I couldn't sleep, that the set hadn't felt right for weeks, and he told me something he never thought I'd record." Rivera leaned forward, suddenly very awake. "You wired yourself for a meeting with a studio head." "I'm an actress," Sandra said with a humorless smile. "Pretending to straighten my necklace while I hit record is not the hardest role I've played." She picked up the device, her finger hovering over the play button. "He admits they slashed the safety rehearsal days, that they rushed the rigging team, that they pushed to keep the full fall because they knew having real stunts would sell the movie better overseas." Keanu felt his stomach twist. "And you've been sitting on this, why?" "Because if I release it," Sandra said quietly, "I go to war with the machine that built my career. They will come after me hard. Non-disclosure clauses, contracts, blacklisting. And if I misstep, they'll bury the recording before it ever sees a courtroom." Rivera exhaled slowly. "But if that recording is as strong as you say, it changes everything. It shifts the focus from you," she nodded at Keanu, "to the people who set the conditions." "All I care about is the truth," Keanu said. "If that truth says I could have done more, I'll own that, but I won't carry a lie so people with power can sleep at night." Sandra closed her eyes for a second, then pressed the play button. As Martin Cole's smooth, dismissive voice filled the small room, Rivera's expression hardened, her pen scratching frantic notes. "There," Sandra said when it ended, her voice trembling just a bit. "That's the line he crossed, and now I have to decide if I cross mine." Rivera looked up. "If we introduce this, your life changes," she warned. "Not just yours, Sandra. The industry will feel it. You will not be their favorite person at the next awards season." Sandra gave a short, bitter laugh. Maybe it's time some of those rooms felt a little less comfortable. Keanu reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "You don't owe me this," he said. "You've already risked enough." She met his gaze, eyes suddenly bright. "I don't owe it to you," she replied. "I owe it to Marco, and to every stunt performer who goes to work wondering if a budget spreadsheet is worth more than their life." She picked up the recorder, weighing it in her palm. "Question is," she added, "who do we trust with this?" They were still sitting in that heavy silence when the door handle turned. All three of them looked up as the conference room door opened, revealing a familiar figure standing in the doorway, eyes widening as she took in the scene and the small device on the table. Alexandra froze, halfway inside, halfway out, realizing she had just walked into a room where the balance of the entire case might have shifted. And suddenly, everyone in that small space understood that whatever happened next would change not only the trial, but the way they would see each other for the rest of their lives. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing Alexandra in the small conference room with the two people she most wanted to protect and most needed to fight. For a second, nobody moved. The recorder lay on the table like a live wire, the air around it buzzing with possibility and danger. "I knocked," she said quietly, almost apologetic. "The bailiff said this room was free for council meetings. I didn't know you were in here." Rivera recovered first. "We were just finishing," she said, her tone cool but not hostile. "If you need the room." "It's fine," Alexandra replied, though her eyes never left the recorder. "I can come back later." Sandra followed her gaze, then deliberately reached out and picked up the device, holding it between her fingers. She weighed a decision in that small motion. "Or," Sandra said, "you can stay, since I think this might concern you more than anyone." Keanu shifted in his chair, tension rippling across his shoulders. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Sandra said firmly. She turned to Alexandra. "You want the truth, right? Not just a win, the truth." Alexandra met her stare. "That's all I've ever wanted." "Good," Sandra said. She walked around the table and placed the recorder gently in front of her. "Then listen." Rivera gave a short nod of consent. Technically, this was the enemy. Practically, she was still an officer of the court. If they were going to detonate a bomb like this, better to know exactly who would get hit. Alexandra hesitated only a moment before pressing play. Martin Cole's voice poured out of the tiny speaker, smooth and confident, the kind of voice used to getting its way in meetings. She heard herself on the recording too, polite but probing, asking careful questions about safety briefings, rehearsal days, chain of command. When the part came where he laughed and said, "Look, we shaved 2 days off the safety schedule, big deal. These guys know what they're doing," Alexandra felt her stomach turn. When he added with a little shrug in his tone, "And Reeves was all in on the real fall, which was perfect for us. You put a face like that on a stunt and every market you care about pays attention." Her hands curled into fists at her sides. The recording ended in a small click. Nobody spoke. Alexandra stared at the device as if she could will it to lie. It didn't. "That's what we're up against," Sandra said quietly. "Not just one man's mistake on set, a whole system that thinks this way." "Why didn't you bring this forward earlier?" Alexandra asked, and there was no accusation in her voice, only a deep, tired sadness. "Because I was afraid," Sandra answered honestly. "Not for me exactly, for the people who work with me. Crews, assistants, younger actors, one wrong move and the machine doesn't just spit me out, it starves anyone standing too close." Alexandra nodded slowly. She understood that fear better than most. Her own work often put her at odds with corporations that preferred settlements to accountability. "And now?" she asked. "And now," Sandra said, "Marco's kids are watching me silently stand next to their uncle's friend in court, and I can't live with them thinking I chose comfort over his life." Keanu's voice was gentle but firm. "If this comes out, the studio will pivot hard," he said. "They'll throw every lawyer they have at us. Are you sure?" "No," Sandra admitted. "I'm not sure of anything except this. Hiding that recording makes me part of the problem." Alexandra lifted the device, turning it over in her hand. Evidence. Ammunition. A confession that could blow a hole in the defense the studio had carefully constructed, not in court, where they had somehow remained on the sidelines, but in the court of public opinion that fed every decision. "This helps your client," Rivera said to Alexandra. "Marco's family deserves to know the conditions he was working under and who set them. It also helps my client," she added, gesturing to Keanu. "It shows that his push for practical stunts happened in a context where safety had been systematically weakened by people with more power than anyone in this room." Alexandra looked at Keanu. There was no accusation in his eyes now, only a steady willingness to let the truth land where it would, even if it bruised him. "You knew rehearsals were cut?" she asked softly. "I heard rumors," he admitted. "People grumbled about the schedule. I pushed for extra checks that day because it didn't feel right. But I didn't go above their heads. I didn't threaten to walk. I told myself it wasn't my job to fight every decision above my pay grade." He gave a small, humorless smile. "Turns out, sometimes the guy with his face on the poster has more pay grade than he wants." Alexandra's throat tightened. "If I use this," she said slowly, "the case changes. I'll have to motion to add the studio as a defendant or at least call Cole as a witness. It will drag this out longer. It will get uglier. Elena will be caught in the middle of something much bigger than she ever wanted." "Do you think she'd rather win fast with half the truth?" Sandra asked, not unkindly. Alexandra thought of Elena's hands twisting in her lap, of her voice when she said, "I just don't want my brother to be forgotten." "No," she answered. "She wants to know why he died, really why." Rivera leaned back, studying her. "What do you want, Ms. Grant?" she asked, honestly. Alexandra looked at Keanu, 1,000 memories crossing between them in the span of a breath. Late-night walks, quiet dinners, the trust they'd built not because of fame, but in spite of it. "I want Marco's family to have justice," she said. "I want dangerous shortcuts to have consequences. I want the man I care about not to be used as a shield for people who never stepped foot on that set." Her voice softened, "And I want to be able to look at myself when this is over." Keanu's eyes shone, but he didn't say a word. Sandra exhaled, some of the stiffness leaving her shoulders. "Then you already know what you have to do," she said. "The only question is whether you're brave enough to do it." Alexandra smiled faintly. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple," Sandra replied. "It's just right." They were interrupted by a knock on the door. The bailiff's head appeared. "Council recess is over. Judge wants everyone back in the courtroom." "We'll be there," Rivera said. As the bailiff left, Alexandra handed the recorder back to Sandra. "You have my word," she said. "I'll introduce this properly, chain of custody, authentication, everything, but this came from you. You decide if you're ready to put your name on it." Sandra stared at the device, then closed her fingers around it like she was gripping the edge of a cliff. "I'll be ready," she said. "Maybe not today, but soon." They filed out of the room together, an uneasy alliance walking side by side. When they entered the courtroom, the murmur of the crowd swelled. Cameras tracked their movements. Somewhere in the back row, a studio representative watched closely, sensing that something in the wind had shifted but not yet knowing how. When everyone was seated, the judge looked over her glasses at the attorneys. "Counsel," she said, "before we bring the jury back in, is there anything either side needs to address?" Alexandra rose. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, voice steady but heart-pounding. "The plaintiff intends to move to amend the complaint and to add additional parties based on newly discovered evidence regarding the production's safety decisions." A ripple went through the courtroom. The studio rep in the back straightened, alarm flashing across his face. The judge's eyebrows lifted. "Additional parties." "Yes, Your Honor," Alexandra continued. "Specifically, the production company and its head of physical production, Mr. Martin Cole. We have evidence suggesting that critical safety measures were knowingly reduced prior to the stunt in which Mr. Rivera lost his life." Behind her, Sandra's hand tightened around the recorder in her pocket. Keanu watched Alexandra as she spoke, not as an opponent now, but as a woman standing in the center of a storm, choosing a harder path when an easier one was available. The judge called both legal teams to the bench for a hushed sidebar. Microphones cut. The courtroom fell into a curious hush as the lawyers argued in low tones about procedure and prejudice and the timing of amendments. In that narrow space between the bench and the bar, studio counsel hissed threats about sanctions and countersuits. Rivera fired back with case law. Alexandra held her ground, her voice edged with something unshakable. Finally, the judge leaned back, considering. "I'm not ruling on the amendment yet," she said, "but I will allow a preliminary hearing on this alleged new evidence outside the presence of the jury. If what you say holds water, Ms. Grant, this case is about to become much bigger than any of you anticipated." The lawyers stepped back. The bailiff began ushering the jury out for the evidentiary hearing. Reporters scribbled furiously, sensing headlines on the horizon. As they passed each other on the way back to their tables, Alexandra paused beside Keanu. She didn't touch him, she didn't dare, but she let her voice reach only his ears. "This might save you," she whispered, eyes bright with a mix of fear and resolve. "But it's going to break everything open, including us." Keanu looked at her, feeling the ground shift under both their feet. "If the truth survives," he said quietly, "maybe we do too." She searched his face for a second, as if trying to believe that, then turned away and walked back to the plaintiff's table, toward a fight that would test her courage, her ethics, and the fragile bridge of trust still standing between them.